Welcome to This Explainer. Today we are uncovering a literal hidden survival mechanism used by the world's most idolized athletes. We're going to dive right into the fascinating intersection of elite sports, personal faith, and sociology, really trying to understand exactly how global superstars navigate the absolutely crushing pressures of ultimate fame.
Think about it. We culturally elevate superstars like Messi, Salah, and Mbappé to the status of deities on the pitch. But who do they look up to when the weight of the world is on their shoulders? It's a completely serious question. When a single misstep can cost your team a championship, and millions of people are intensely analyzing your every move on social media, how do you keep from just crumbling?
Well, Lionel Messi made this startling admission, point blank. Acknowledging his incredible abilities as a gift highlights this profound juxtaposition. You've got the chaotic, hyper-performance-driven culture of sports, where literally everything is about your latest stat or your last win, clashing right up against the quiet, grounding reality of personal faith.
Which brings us to Section 1, the problem, the precarious professional.
So let's dive right into this. To really grasp why these global icons lean so heavily on spirituality, we first have to explore the systemic psychological problem of an elite sporting career. I mean, sure, it might look incredibly glamorous from the outside, but underneath all the wealth and the shiny trophies, it is a remarkably fragile existence. Academic research maps out a footballer's life cycle across a timeline that's just filled with severe failure points. We're talking intense pressures of academy selections as a kid, to super precarious early contracts, to the constant looming threat of a career-ending injury in your 20s, and finally, inevitable early retirement by age 35. Deriving your entire self-worth from this career is psychologically dangerous. If your value as a human being is tied to this volatile timeline, it's like building your house on quicksand.
And that leads us to Section 2, the paradigm shift, identity in the academic lens.
Look, if an athlete's identity is strictly tied to that roller coaster of a timeline we just looked at, they are totally trapped. The academic solution to this trap is what researchers actually call a theocentric foundation. This is a radically different worldview. In this paradigm, an athlete's worth isn't something they have to desperately earn out there on the pitch. Rather, it's viewed as a secure, unconditional gift. It fundamentally shifts their center of gravity completely away from public opinion and performance metrics.
The contrast here is just stark. An achieved identity essentially traps you in this vicious cycle of anxiety. If your worth equals your performance, well, a bad match means you literally feel worthless. It breeds huge hubris in victory and crushing shame in defeat. But a received identity? That treats worth as an unearned gift. It completely severs your personal value from your work. The research actually shows that this specific shift unlocks genuine fulfillment, allowing these athletes to get back to the simple joy of playing the game they love.
Let's see how this looks in Section 3, Lionel Messi deflecting the glory.
So, let's look at our case studies to see how this plays out in the real world. Applying this academic lens, we see players like Messi openly using their Christian faith to deflect all that dizzying glory directed at them. Despite lifting the World Cup and having a fervent football-mad nation view him as basically divine, Messi actively rejects the God label. When asked about his unmatched talent, he points outward. He says God gave him the gift. He utilizes his received identity to stay incredibly grounded. He simply doesn't need to absorb the worship of the fans to feel significant, because his significance is already locked in elsewhere.
And hey, this isn't just academic theory. It plays out in really practical ways every single day. Former PSG manager Maurizio Pochettino noted that Messi's faith-driven humility shows up behind the scenes constantly. The absolute greatest player in the world maintains his equilibrium by behaving like a totally normal guy. He literally waits his turn in line for the physio. He waits in line in the canteen just like any teenager fresh out of the academy. That is the received identity in full action. He doesn't require VIP treatment to validate his worth.
Moving on to Section 4, Mo Salah, faith in the public square.
So, shifting from internal humility to public expression, Mo Salah unapologetically brought his faith right onto the pitch. His historic 9-season run at Liverpool showed how deeply Islamic faith can anchor an athlete and, quite remarkably, transform an entire community in the process. The key here is his visible engagement. In a European football environment that can sometimes be, quite frankly, heavily hostile, Salah openly engaged in pre-match prayers, called dua. He famously celebrated his record-breaking goals with sujud, the Islamic act of prostration. He used his faith as this massive grounding force amidst the absolute boiling pot of pressure in the English Premier League.
And his authentic display of received identity resonated so profoundly that the fans responded in just a beautiful way. They wove his faith directly into the terrace culture through these now legendary chants. Instead of rejecting his differences, the Liverpool supporters embraced his Muslim identity, singing loud and proud from the stands. If he's good enough for you, he's good enough for me. If he scores another few, then I'll be Muslim too.
The tangible, real-world impact of that authenticity is, quite honestly, staggering. A fascinating Stanford University study proved the real sociological power of Salah's presence. Researchers tracked an astonishing 18.9% drop in Islamophobic hate crimes in the Merseyside area right after Salah arrived at Liverpool. I mean, wow. They also noted a massive reduction in anti-Muslim language online. By anchoring himself in his faith, Salah naturally shifted the culture of an entire major city.
Next up, Section 5, Kylian Mbappé, grounded by family.
Mbappe's story is a bit different, illustrating how faith functions as a grounding force through the beautiful complexity of an intercultural family dynamic. His background is a really rich tapestry. Born in Paris with Algerian and Cameroonian descent, he grew up with a practicing Muslim mother and a practicing Christian father. Because of this, Mbappé was raised with a deep, inherent respect for diverse religious practices. In his household, seeing different expressions of faith wasn't a source of division at all. Instead, it was a unifying way of simply being together as a family.
And while he definitely maintains a quiet dignity about his personal life, his grounding became super clear during a really sweet interaction with some young fans. When asked point-blank by children about his religious confession, Mbappé warmly and openly confirmed he's practicing Christian. Just like Messi and Salah, Mbappé utilizes a spiritual anchor, that received identity we keep talking about, to navigate his absolute meteoric rise to global fame, keeping him firmly connected to his roots rather than getting completely lost in the celebrity.
Which brings us to our final section, number 6, winning beyond the pitch.
Looking at these three distinct global icons, the academic thesis of the received identity is just completely validated on the world stage. It proves that the absolute most sustainable way to survive a performance-obsessed culture is to anchor yourself in something totally outside of it. Let's recap how this sociological shift actually happens. Step 1. These athletes detach their self-worth from their athletic performance and public opinion. Step 2. They anchor themselves in an unconditional, received identity. Step 3. Because they no longer have to desperately earn their human value out on the pitch, they reconnect with the authentic, unburdened joy of the sport itself. And finally, Step 4. By operating from a place of secure authenticity, they naturally, almost effortlessly, redefine the culture of the community around them. So that leaves us with a really profound final thought for you to ponder long after this explainer ends. We've seen exactly how this academic theory plays out for the global elites. But if the secret to surviving ultimate pressure is letting go of the need to achieve your identity, what could that paradigm shift do for you? Imagine how your life, your career, or your relationships might actually change if you stopped trying to achieve your worth and simply received it instead.